Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session on Inclusion Matters, Tools to Promote Inclusion During Turbulent Times. My name is Lynn Anderson. I'm a professor in the Recreation, Parks, and Leisure Studies Department at SUNY Cortland, and I am also the director of the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center. So today I'm very excited to talk to you about some tools to help promote inclusion during a time, I think, when we probably need these tools more than ever because we need inclusion more than ever. So what I'd like to do today is just talk about the importance of inclusion, how much it matters now during this pandemic and all the isolation and divisiveness that we're experiencing. Inclusion is an antidote to that. Bringing people together through play and recreation in the spirit of equity and inclusion enhances well-being for everybody, for individual people, for our neighborhoods, our communities, and our overall society. So in this session, I'd like to highlight some of the researched benefits of inclusion of people of all abilities in recreation. And then I want to share a wealth of resources and tools that we have at the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center to help you promote inclusion in your corner of the world. I'd also like to share just a few examples of things that Parks and Rec agencies are doing around the country during the pandemic to promote inclusion despite being separated from each other. So by the end of the session, I hope you'll be able to list at least 3 benefits of inclusion for individuals, communities, and our society. Be able to list at least 3 tools that are available to you to help promote inclusion where you're at. And I'd like to end on giving you an action planning template. So as you move forward past the session, you can think through and put some things into practice, hopefully. So after these introductions, we're going to talk about the benefits of inclusion, some tools for staff training and inclusion, including Inclusion U Online, Inclusion Ambassador training, and all the different booklets and articles and resources that we've developed here at the center. Tools for fostering inclusion at the program level. I'd like to share with you the Inclusion Toolkit app and the important role of partnerships, especially during this time that we're going through right now. And then some tools for sharing information about inclusive recreation. So we'll look at the Inclusivity assessment tool, where you can assess and share information with your community, the Recreation Database, the Recreation Finder app, and finally the Inclusive Recreation website. And then I'd like to just share some ideas from the field on what's been going on with inclusion during this pandemic. And we'll end with an action plan and a summary. So let's start off with the benefits of inclusion. And I think we need to ask, ourselves, well, why does this matter? Why is inclusion even important to talk about? If you think about the sheer number of people who have a disability in the United States, in the last census, 1 in nearly 4 people have a disability. That's a very large proportion of people in our country that have varying ability levels. As well, people, as our country ages, people that are older are reporting a disability. And that's a growing group of people that use our services and access our parks and recreation areas. So you can see, just based on quantity, just sheer numbers, inclusion really matters. But beyond that, there are so many benefits to inclusion that it just makes sense, as human beings, to foster inclusion in our communities and our agencies and programs. So let's just talk a little bit about what the research has shown as far as how inclusion benefits individuals, communities, and agencies. I guess it makes sense to start off with social justice. And I think this is so important in our times now when we have so much systemic bias against different groups, marginalized groups in the United States. And it's just the right thing to do to be inclusive at your agency. It honors people's rights. And so people with disabilities have the same rights as people without disabilities. So by being inclusive, you are honoring people's rights. Also, those days of sheltering or tucking away people with disabilities to keep them safe, the research is clear that, like anybody, risk leads to growth, and it leads to full engagement, and it leads to a sense of dignity. And so people with varying abilities also need the opportunities to experience risk like anybody experiences risk. The research is very clear on that, on the fact that inclusive communities, inclusive recreation programs change people's attitudes. So where there might be fear or discriminatory attitudes towards people with disabilities, when you promote an inclusive recreation environment, attitudes change. They become more positive and more accepting. In people with and without disabilities benefit from a change in attitudes and an increased positive regard for each other. And of course, inclusion promotes diversity. Diversity meaning that all of us are in this together. We're all human beings. The more diverse we are, the more vibrant we are as a society, as a community. The research, though, also documents many personal benefits to recreation. Inclusion provides opportunities to socialize and build friendships. The research is clear that friendships and socialization are crucial to our well-being. As well, inclusion provides role models for all of us. We get to see how each other functions, and this helps us learn from each other. When a person, maybe a child with a disability, is in a segregated program with only other people with disabilities, or vice versa, when there are no children with disabilities in a program, you don't get to see and role model a broader array of positive behaviors. Inclusion helps build life skills, whether it's physical skills, physical fitness skills, community skills, social skills. Inclusion gives the opportunity for people to develop and learn those skills. And that in turn leads to greater independence, being able to do more things yourself. And it also leads to greater interdependence, learning how we can help each other to be able to pursue our passions in recreation. And there are also social benefits to inclusion. We've already talked about the idea that it creates a more diverse community, a more diverse agency that you serve. It creates more typical or more authentic communities, and it improves the quality of life for all people. So inclusion benefits not just people with disabilities, but it benefits everybody, all of us. And then we may as well talk about the economic benefits that we're talking about a large group of people that have a disability. That's a large market of people, especially if you're in a recreation business, that really does not make sense to exclude. The latest research shows that people with disabilities, being the fastest growing subgroup in the US, have $490 billion in disposable income. So that I mean, there's an economic argument for inclusion. And I think I really like the work that the National Recreation and Parks Association has been doing in fostering or promoting inclusion in parks and recreation. And I like this quote, park and recreation agencies have the power and the responsibility to create welcoming and inclusive spaces that promote positive health outcomes physically, socially, and mentally, and connect people to our natural habitats with an emphasis on reaching our most vulnerable populations and community members. So NRPA, I think, makes the case that we, as recreation providers, do have a lot of power and influence in our communities. And with that power comes greater responsibility, that we really should step up and be the leaders in our community in promoting inclusion and equity. And really during these challenging times where I think maybe many of us might be experiencing exclusion for the first times in our lives, it maybe has made us more empathetic to what that might feel like on a regular basis for somebody who's struggling to be included. Inclusion has become even more important. The research that's been done recently shows that social isolation and loneliness are significantly impacting people's mental health and physical health, that we have a lot of uncertainty about the future, that we need each other even more than ever to help cope with that. With all the restrictions that are on us, we're not able to do as much as we want with each other. And the stress level has been very high, not just for individuals, but for families and for communities. And we've had so many losses during these last several months: employment, typical routines, access, just a lot of loss. The American Psychological Association published the results from a Harris poll that surveyed thousands of Americans, adults and teenagers. And those were some of the negative impacts that they found. And then what they found that people feel they need during this time to be able to get through. And the first is to facilitate access to services. So especially mental health services, and not just now, but even after the pandemic ends, to connect, to create new, different, safe ways to connect with people, to help people observe important milestones in their lives in new ways, because we can't congregate in large groups. But we still need those milestones for our well-being, and to provide innovative opportunities for people, that we can't keep doing things the way we've always been doing them, at least not for a while, and maybe not again. So what I wanted to do is to share some ways to connect, some services and some innovative opportunities that we could provide from the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center to help you better facilitate inclusion during these turbulent times. So the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center is headquartered at SUNY Cortland. We've been around since 2007, so we're entering our 14th year of providing services and resources to promote inclusive recreation. Our mission is to help all people play wherever they choose to play. So we have developed through the years several evidence-based tools and strategies to help people who provide recreation services and recreation areas and spaces to do that in the most inclusive and open ways possible. So what I wanted to do today was to share tools that focus on how to help staff be more inclusive and use best practices in inclusion. some tools to help foster kind of in the trenches programming strategies to be more inclusive. These are things that you could actually do now, even during these times of separation. Some tools to share information about inclusive recreation opportunities for people. So these are some of the things that I'd like to share with you today. Well, I wanted to start off talking about tools for staff training. And at the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center, we have 2 fully online trainings for inclusion. The first one that I want to share is Inclusion U Online. We've been delivering this training online really since 2007, but online since 2015. And we are probably nearing 7,000 or 8,000 people who have gone through this training across the US and even across the world. We have people from other countries taking the training. And I'll tell you a little bit about the training and then how you might think about using it. So it's 9 modules, and the training focuses on 2 main areas. One, it provides a foundation, a very strong foundation in what inclusion is and why it's important. And then it teaches you how to use the inclusivity assessment tool so that you have a way, a lens or a way to describe and measure inclusion at your agencies and your programs, your areas and your facilities. There are 9 modules in Inclusion U. The first module just overviews the center itself and what we do, what our work is, and how this training fits into our work. Module 2 gives a foundation of what we mean by inclusion and what we don't mean by inclusion. Module 3 looks at what kinds of things do you need to know about people's ability levels to most help them participate in your programs and services and spaces. Module 4 gets an in-depth dive and look at the inclusivity assessment tool, all the different sections of the tool and how to use it. Module 5 gives you an overview and a knowledge of physical inclusion, so physical accessibility and universal design. Module 6 looks at administrative inclusion, those things that you do in terms of policies and procedures and registration processes and marketing and evaluation and staff training to promote inclusion from the top down in your agency as well as from the bottom up. Module 7 looks at actual in the trenches programming and what can you do during programs to facilitate inclusive practices and include everybody in the program to fully participate. Module 8 looks at the very important area of partnerships. How can you connect with other groups and agencies to best promote inclusion? One of the lessons we've learned probably more deeply than any through the years with best practices and inclusion is that partnerships are key, that we don't do it alone, that we help each other to be more inclusive. And then module 9 is sort of just a wrap up. You take a final exam, you learn how to upload any assessments you use to the online database and that type of thing. And once you take the final exam, then you become a certified inclusivity assessor. So as a result of doing the 10-hour training, you become a certified inclusivity assessor. You get a little CIA card. You get a certificate of completion that shows how many contact hours, when you completed it, and then all your scores on your quizzes and your final exam. So this is really nice if you're using this for staff training because you can have evidence of staff having completed this training. It provides a form of accountability where people can work on their own through the training itself paced, but they can provide you with evidence that they've completed the training successfully. So it is worth one full CEU because it takes on average 10 hours to complete the training, again, at your own pace. You can start and stop as you need to. For those of you that are CTRSs, it is pre-approved by NCTRC, and it is also approved for the International Continuing Ed Unit so that it is also accepted if you're a CPRP, a Certified Park and Rec Professional. As I said, it's self-paced, it's completely online. As a result of the training, you become a certified inclusivity assessor. And as a result of that certification, then you have access to all the inclusivity assessment tools. And I'm going to talk more about the inclusivity assessment tool in a little while. But that is a tool that's highly useful for you as a rec professional to give you a way to go about assessing for inclusion at your agencies, your programs, your parks, your spaces. And then it also gives you access to the Inclusion Ambassador training. So once you become a CIA, a Certified Inclusivity Assessor, by completing Inclusion U Online, you then have access to another training that you can invite unlimited numbers of your staff or anybody to for free to complete the 3-hour training, which I will talk about next. So there's a lot of benefit to doing the 10-hour online Inclusion U training. What many park and rec districts or departments have done is have their core full-time staff take Inclusion U Online. And then those people can then invite part-time seasonal youth staff to do the 3-hour training. So you've got a core group of people who are trained at a deeper level and who are also certified inclusivity assessors. Look, before I talk about this, I just wanted to let you know that Inclusion U Online does have a fee. It's $49.95 for one person to take it, but we also have group rates, so you can greatly reduce the cost. So the group rates are on the website, so it gets as cheap as I think $20 a person if you do a group rate. So it's a quite affordable training that results in access to lots of other tools and trainings. So I think it's worth, investing in for a core group of people. Many universities have adopted Inclusion U Online in their Parks and Rec curricula for students that are in, training to become professionals in our field. And there is, if you are in a situation where you interact with college students and want to use this training, there's also a professor code or a way for professors to keep track of all their students and how they're progressing in the training. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to contact me, and the handout I've provided along with this session has information for people that would like to use Inclusion U in classes. So the next training that I'd like to share with you is called the Inclusion Ambassador training. And this training is completely video-based, so it's very digestible and usable, particularly, for maybe your youth staff or your part-time staff. It's 6 units long. It's 3 hours. During and throughout the training, there are experiential activities that are optional to do that people doing the training can post to our social media accounts. You earn badges, and if you want to look at the detailed curriculum in the handout I provided, there's a curriculum map for the Inclusion Ambassador training. And I forgot to mention there's a curriculum map in the handout for Inclusion U Online as well. So you can see how all the different, content and how learning outcomes are assessed, and handouts and readings and that type of thing. So I'd like to share with you just a little bit, a little intro video. The Inclusion U Online is hosted by Jess, who's a teenager who happens to have Down syndrome, and I'm just going to let her share an intro to the Inclusion U Online training, and I'm going to share my computer sound so you'll be able to hear her voice in the video.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica, but my friends call me Jess. Welcome to the Inclusive Ambassador Training. I, Jess, will be your host for the training. I am so happy you are doing this online training. It is really important. You are going to learn all about the inclusive in recreation. I love recreation. My favorite things to do are skateboarding, sports, and my high school, snowboarding, going camping, and hanging out with my friends. I have made so many friends doing fun things together. When people with disabilities feel welcome and included in recreation, so many good things happen for everyone. You'll learn about that in this training and you'll become a certified inclusive ambassador like me. I hope you enjoy the training.
So Jess is the host of the training, and so she starts every one of the 6 units off with a little animated video. And I just wanted to give a plug to my friends at Bene Parks and Recreation, and the young woman that we hired to narrate those animation videos for us. So the 6 units are listed here, and this is kind of a screenshot of what it looks like when you enter the training. Introductions, ability awareness, physical inclusion, social inclusion, measuring inclusivity, and an action plan. And each unit is made up of really short lessons. So the units will start off, this is an example of unit 1 where there's that introductory video I just showed you. And then there's another video where Jess introduces the unit or unit 1, and then whatever lessons there are, and then an optional assignment and a quiz. So this is a typical way the units are set up, and each one of those is a video. So it's more watching versus reading, although there are often handouts or really short readings in each unit. And this is a typical layout, some screenshots. So you can see that in this particular lesson, there's 4 videos and there's 1 short handout. So you can see that as an example. And at the end of each unit, there's an optional assignment where you can have, so if you were doing this, for example, with a youth group or, a scout group or something, you could actually do these as projects where, for example, this one is make a poster or art about inclusion, write a poem about inclusion, a story, a comic strip, present to your peers about inclusion. It kind of just gives different ideas. Here's some examples from people have posted to our Inclusive Rec Facebook page after as they've gone through the training, and I really like them. I think they're really, really great. And then at the end of each unit, there's a fun review activity. It might be a game or a crossword puzzle or something to get people to review what was in the unit. And then there'll be a short quiz that you need to pass. And if you don't pass, you can retake, you can redo the unit, however, till you're able to pass the quiz. When you complete all 6 units, again, you get a certificate of completion for the Inclusion Ambassador training. And for each unit, you earn a badge. So these are badges that could be posted on social media. This is worth 0.3 CEUs, and it too is pre-approved by NCTRC, and it's also approved for international continuing ed units. So if you're a CPRP, it's self-paced. So if you have staff you'd like to take this, you can just say by a certain date have it completed, and there's, or you can use it in a group setting. I know the Austin Parks and Recreation Department in Texas, what they did was they had their core inclusion staff become CIAs, go through Inclusion U online. And then those core inclusion staff then worked with part-time and seasonal staff. Some of them just had their staff go through the Inclusion Ambassador training on their own, but some pre-pandemic, met all together and watched the video lessons together. So there's different ways that you could use this training with your staff. By the way, with Austin Parks and Rec, I don't know how many of their staff, all the way from their park maintenance people to their inclusion specialists, went through the inclusion ambassador training. This is really great to see a department-wide, a large city department commit like that to inclusion and get everybody trained. And I think I've seen many Parks and Rec departments are using it now. And I think it's been really great during this pandemic to have this kind of a training available that's entertaining and fun and short enough that, you know, you can have your staff working on it from a remote, you know, and being able to provide training without having to get together. So another staff training tool I wanted to just briefly talk about was the many booklets and handouts and articles that we have on our website. Many of these we've developed ourselves. You know, so you're welcome to go to the website and just click on the link resources, and you'll find all the different articles. We have adaptive equipment links and inclusive recreation best practices links, and just many, many, many things. But we've got a lot of resources. So for example, these are all PDF booklets you can download that we have up on our website that, you know, might be really useful to you. And they're things that you can share with staff, or they're all free. They're all available on our website. So please check that out. And in the handout, our web address is easy to access from that handout. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the Inclusion Toolkit app. So those things I just shared with you are all really great for staff training. Now I wanted to talk about some things you could do in your actual programs and strategies. And I think the Inclusion Toolkit app might be really great right now to take a look at, because it's something you could build if you're working remotely, but you know this is going to end and we're going to be back. We're going to be back together like we've always been. So this would be a great time to build your inclusion toolkit from a remote location to have ready to use in the trenches in the field once your programs start back up face-to-face. As well, you could create a COVID-19 category, which I'll share with you the categories in a minute, and you can preload many resources for your staff to use in programming now if you are beginning to meet face-to-face again with social distancing and face masks and other strategies you've put in place to keep people safe. So this app is available for free on the App Store or Google Play for Android or iOS. And this is just a screenshot of what the app would look like. So the opening screen shows all the different categories of inclusion tips or tools. And then when you open each category, it opens up whatever you've entered into that category. And then when you open up that link, it gives you the specific information you've loaded there, as well as any links or photos or whatever you want to put in this app. So it's truly a toolkit for you to build. So we've already put some things in from the Inclusive Rec Center, things that we get a lot of requests about that are commonly asked questions. We've loaded information like that. But really the idea of the toolkit is to have at your fingertips on your mobile device the tools that you need, the reminders, the questions that come up in the field that your staff might have that you can just pull up on your mobile device and have that information at your fingertips. And it gives you a way to categorize it so it makes sense to you. It gives you a way to save tips and links that you know are useful and you'd like to have available while you're working with people in programs. So right now we have categories like physical accessibility, adapted activities, adapted equipment, sensory and calming ideas, positive behavioral supports, policies and procedures, staff training, and more. But you can create your own category. So this would be a really great one where you could create a COVID-19 category and put all the things in that category that you want available for your staff to be able to pull up and say, what was that policy again we were going to be following? So like I said, we have some things that we put in just to get started, and you can remove those if you don't want those in there. It's really a companion to our website, but it doesn't need to be used with our website. So this is what the categories look like. This is on an iPad, so when it's on your phone, it's obviously laid out a little bit different. But this is where I would add a new category for COVID-19. And you can cross-link. So if you have something under staff training, it could also go under policies and procedures. Like you can put, you can list multiple categories to have something in. And before I move on, I just wanted to say, I think this would be a great place to, like if you have little short training videos. So for example, if you know that you're continually showing staff how to put people's feet into the adaptive bike, you could do just a little short YouTube video, how you do it, and then put it in that category of wherever adapted equipment or staff training or wherever or both. And then that staff could just pull that up and like, oh yeah, that's how you do it. So that's the idea of the Inclusion Toolkit. Like I said, this would be a perfect time for you to download it and kind of tailor it and start building it up now. I mean, I'm not sure how many of you are still working remotely, but this would be a wonderful time to build your own inclusion toolkit. Another tool we've developed are calming kits based on evidence-based practice. So each item in this handout, which is on our website, and also our great partner of ours, the Inclusive Fitness Network, just took and developed a booklet for us on sensory backpacks or calming kits. So for each item, is sort of how it helps. And so basically we have this handout there for you to put your own kits together. As well, you could develop some communication tools for parents who might be, recreating now at home versus at your program, and give them some ideas and some strategies for calming kits using the information we put together. We've also put together information sheets on mobile sensory rooms and quiet spaces. And so that's another thing that you can share with participants and parents and families in your program about how to put together a quiet space for people with sensory differences that need that break. We provide this little handout that you can use, some ways to go about building the quiet space. And then some of the sensory items. So we've developed basically a grid that shows, for touch, these are some typical items and here's where you can get them and here's what they help with. For sight, here's some typical items, sort of the research supporting it, and here's where you can purchase them. The same thing with sound, with smell. So the idea is that you're putting together in a mobile unit, whether it's a backpack or a rolling suitcase or whatever works for your program, all these kind of sensory space items that could be used anywhere. So I'm going to share again an example from Austin Parks and Rec Department. And they have put together a mobile sensory room that anybody throughout the entire park district can check out. And it's actually a large tent, and they basically have everything in it to create a mobile sensory room that could be set up in a park. It could be set up in an auditorium. It could be set up in, any space where parks and recreation programs are going on. Another tool that I wanted to promote, and it's not a tool like on our website, although we do list many partners, but I just wanted to reinforce the idea that partnerships are critical to promoting inclusion, that the more you can work together, the more you can be inclusive. And I wanted to just give a call out to two great partners that through these last few months have been really great. And Fit In, or the Fitness Inclusion Network, which is led by Dr. Ninka Dosa at SUNY Upstate. We've been working with them often through the years, but this past several months, Dr. Dosa has had her staff putting together video tours of many of the parks and recreation sites in the Syracuse, Central New York area. And those video tours are going to be embedded into our online recreation database, which I'll talk about in a minute. And so those, not only developing those videos, but also putting together a guide if you want to create a video. So how do you do it? They also, you can see this sensory backpack booklet. They basically took our information from our Inclusive Recreation Resource Center work that we've been doing and put it into this really beautiful PDF booklet that you can download off our website. Rochester Accessible Adventures, under the leadership of Anita O'Brien, has been using the Inclusion Ambassador training for hundreds of youth and adults that have been going through that training over the last several months. It's just been gratifying to see the number of people who have become inclusion ambassadors under Anita's leadership with Rochester Accessible Adventures. So those are just two call outs I wanted to make. I've mentioned the Austin Parks and Rec and how much they've been doing. The Texas Fish and Wildlife has also been having many people go through Inclusion U online. I mentioned the universities. They're across the United States and Canada. There's just been thousands of students going through Inclusion U online. So just lots of great partnerships. The next way to share information about inclusion, I'm just checking my time, is to use the Inclusivity Assessment Tool. And the Inclusivity Assessment Tool measures physical and social aspects of inclusion at a recreation agency. So it is a way for you to look objectively at your own agency and programs and spaces and see where there are areas where you'd like to improve your practices in inclusion. So the tool gathers information on physical access. Can somebody approach, enter, and use our facility? And so recreation is very, very broad. So there's a core tool that looks at things that are everywhere, no matter what kind of recreation amenity. So parking and entering and bathrooms, stairs or elevators. So common things that are everywhere. And then there are many specialty checklists, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So you can use the Inclusivity Assessment Tool on any recreation physical environment. It can be tailored to each unique type of environment in our field. And then it also gathers information on social inclusion. What are the administrative practices? What are the programming practices that foster inclusion? And what adaptive equipment is available for people to use? The specialty checklists are, here's a list. You can read through the list, and you're welcome to go on the website and look at more information here, but you can see all of the different short tools you use with the core Inclusivity Assessment Tool to describe how usable the recreation area is that you're assessing for inclusivity. I do want to stress that the inclusivity assessment tool is not an ADA audit. It doesn't result in a grade A for accessibility or an F. It describes what's there. So somebody can look at that information that might have a different ability level and say, I can go there. I can use that area. Or, oh, I'm going to need to bring this along. So the idea is to give people accurate and descriptive information about what's at a recreation amenity. That being said, when you complete an inclusivity assessment at your agency, you're going to probably identify some things you could put in an action plan to improve. So the inclusivity assessment tool includes the user manual ebook, which is you download when you register for Inclusion U online. It includes the toolkit, the checklist. The toolkit is actually something you learn how to put together. You can complete the inclusivity assessment tool in 3 different ways. You can use the online forms where you enter everything directly into our online database. You can download and print PDFs of the inclusivity assessment tool. And then you can use the free app, the CIA app, which you can download again from Google Play or the App Store. And so basically you can complete an inclusivity assessment on your mobile device or your phone. And here's what the app looks like. And again, it's free. And it's basically the assessment tool in a mobile device. Once you complete an inclusivity assessment, that information then goes into our online recreation database. So that the database is available worldwide. Anybody that has web access can access the database and search for whatever amenity or whatever type of recreation activity they'd like to do, and they can search by a map feature, they can search by an agency or activity, or they can search by typing in a town, a city, or an area. And basically that online recreation database shows that accurate and specific information about a recreation agency or environment collected by an inclusivity assessor. And so here's just a screenshot. You can see that it includes the agency information about physical accessibility, administrative practices, adaptive equipment, program practices, a summary, which is shown on the main page when you open a database, and then who collected the information and who was interviewed, as well as photos, and we're going to be now adding videos with this new project. So that's an example of the inclusivity, the online recreation database. You can also download another free app we've developed called the Recreation Finder app, and that is basically the database on your mobile phone, so you can use it on any mobile device. And so here's a little screenshot where you can search, you can have all that same information that's available on the computer-based. And then the last thing I wanted to end with as far as tools is just encourage you to go to our website, because we have so many more resources on the website that I haven't talked about today. And we would love to have you download anything that you think would be useful to help you as you facilitate inclusion and recreation at your agency. So those are the tools I wanted to share with you. I thought I would end just the last few minutes here by talking about ideas from the field as far as how are people facilitating inclusion during this pandemic at a time when we all feel excluded to a point. We all feel somewhat isolated and cut off. And so just, talking with colleagues and friends around the country and different educational sessions I've attended recently, I thought I'd give you some of the ideas that I've seen that I think are really wonderful. I thought I'd start off with Inclusion Matters by Shane's Inspiration. So Inclusion Matters is based in San Diego, California, but they serve the world really. And so they started off as Shane's Inspiration, but now they're called Inclusion Matters. They started off their main mission was to build inclusive playgrounds around the world. And then kind of evolved into saying, you know, you can build the physical structure, but how can we help kids be more inclusive while they're playing on the playgrounds? And they've developed a wonderful educational program where they go into schools and recreation agencies and actually work with staff and kids to promote social inclusion on the playgrounds. So once the pandemic hit, they needed to come up with some strategies to still foster that kind of social inclusion, but remotely. So in your handout, I've actually put a sheet that they developed where they put their COVID-19 responses. And also, here's their website where they have many, many more resources. But I just share just a few snapshots of things that they've been doing. So they've been doing all kinds of fun for all activities, is what they're calling them. And the fun for all activities are basically the educational, recreational programs doing it virtually. So it's led by Teens for Social Inclusion. They're half-hour gatherings, brings together kids with and without disabilities for play, connectivity, and fun on the Zoom platform. So here's an example. They're going to do a Halloween event. I think they're going to all be able to wear their costumes and get together in their costumes. They do a story time where somebody reads a book. Shane's Inspirations founder is a Hollywood producer and director. And so he's also a SUNY Cortland alum. And he has a lot of connections with celebrities. And so they've been able to recruit different celebrities to do some of these activities to draw in even more kids. They do a song time, and these are all via Zoom. They do a craft time. They tell people ahead of time, here's the supplies you need, and then they all get together on Zoom and do that. They do a virtual play club called Play at Home, and a global day of play. They post everything that they do on YouTube, so you can access it at any point and not just at the live point. So you can kind of see their schedule for what's coming up. So that's some of the things they've done. But they're still, true to their roots. They still have a main part of their focus is developing inclusive playgrounds all over the world. And here's a playground that's going to be opening. Just grand opening actually was just a few days ago. Because they couldn't do an in-person grand opening, they did basically a Zoom, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live grand opening, where they involved all their partners that helped to develop this playground, but still developed the playground and still did the grand opening just in a different way. I've talked about Austin Parks and Rec a little bit, and I wanted to give a call out to Laura Heiselman, who's in the middle screen there. Laurel is a CTRS and a CPRP, and she's the head of their inclusion unit. And she's just been a real inclusion champion for Austin Parks and Recreation, and a lot of her leadership has helped to really foster inclusion in their Parks and Rec department. I have their web address here if you want to contact them and learn more. But they have really embraced Zoom. So they took everything they were doing before the pandemic, and now they're doing it in a different way via Zoom. So they had a cooking club, and now they're doing a cooking show almost, where people Zoom in and cook together. They're doing all kinds of entertaining and fun activities, connecting people via Zoom. So I was really amazed at the amount of connection they're doing by using Zoom, and you can see how they geared up with more equipment in their Parks and Rec Community Center to be able to do more sophisticated things with their Zoom events that they host more than daily. I think the National or the Northwest Special Rec Association is another really wonderful example of responding to COVID and how it's impacted their programs and services. So they have begun to to offer their face-to-face programs again, but they needed some guidelines on how to go about including somebody in a program given the constrictions put in place by social distancing and mask wearing and the different kinds of things we have to pay attention to as we come back together during the pandemic. So they outlined a very clear inclusion policy during COVID-19. And then they developed an online tool to help assess the inclusion of an individual person in a program. And it's basically a decision tree online tool where you as a recreation provider, you might have a child with a behavior difference that's asking to be included in a program. And so you can go through this decision tree and help you decide, yes, they can do this, no, they can't do that, yes, they can do this, and at what point would it become not safe? Is there a no point where you have to say, we can't at this time include your child physically and directly in this program, but what else can we do in lieu of that? And they've developed in the pink slide up in the upper right-hand corner, an actual online kind of assessment that the rec therapist or the inclusion coordinator can do with the individual as before they're being included to make sure they understand physical distancing, for example, or how to wear a mask, or, you know, so just really expertly developed assessment tools to help facilitate safe inclusion during a pandemic. So I again have listed the website for the Northwest Special Rec Association. If you'd like more information about their assessment processes and policies they've put in place for inclusion during COVID-19, they're quite sophisticated and they would be happy to share with you. They're really great people there. And then last, I just wanted to end with some resources from the National Rec and Park Association. They have developed the Parks for Inclusion Policy Guide, the Parks for Inclusion Policy Template, and the Parks for Inclusion Vision Stand. And that's what I wanted to end with. Sort of your action plan, like I've bombarded you with all kinds of tools today, all kinds of things you could use, but what are you actually going to use? What are you actually going to do next? And so I put in the handout this, the NRPA's Parks for Inclusion Vision Stand, and I would love it if you would take this after the session is over and fill it out and have all your staff fill it out and have a discussion, a Zoom discussion around your vision stand. And so the vision stand is, we are whoever. We bring the strengths of two communities and families we serve. We've made a commitment to inclusion because we envision a future in which our community, and you'll share your vision. This vision is especially important to our organization because, and why is that vision important to you? In the coming months, we'll continue to move our inclusion efforts forward by, to accomplish this, we know we'll need resources and support from, and in the coming years, this work will be sustained by. So it's quite a simple document that could lead to really rich discussion and reinforcement of the things that really matter to you when it comes to inclusion. So I just wanted to end with a couple thoughts. I think that these are turbulent times. But maybe this is also an opportunity. Maybe this is a reset for us. The World Urban Parks, I thought this was just a really excellent insight that COVID-19 has provided an important opportunity for Parks and Rec professionals, urban planners, public health, government agencies, and others to examine existing park policies, access, and design with an equity lens. You can start now to ask the following questions. How can parks better serve communities, improve their health, improve environment, support social well-being? How can organizations prioritize quality access in communities that lack them? So I really like this idea that, you know, these are hard times, but they also are an opportunity for us to move forward better. All right, so I gave you lots, and here's just the main ideas. We talked about the benefits of inclusion, tools for staff training, including Inclusion U Online and the Inclusion Ambassador training, and the many booklets and articles and resources on the Inclusive Rec website. Tools for fostering inclusion in programs, including the Inclusion Toolkit app, the calming spaces and sensory spaces, handouts and resources, and partnerships. And then tools for sharing information about inclusive recreation. So the Inclusivity Assessment Tool, the Online Recreation Database, the Recreation Finder app, the IRC website, and its resources. Gave you a few examples from the field of what people are doing during the pandemic for inclusion, and kind of ended with the action plan, the inclusion vision stand. That would be a wonderful remote exercise to do as a staff together. So I hope that you found something useful from this session. I would love to hear from you if you have ideas or questions, since we can't dialogue in person. Here's the web address for the Inclusive Rec Center, and here's my email if you'd like to reach out and contact me. So I very much appreciate spending an hour with you today. I hope that you're looking forward to getting back together and doing it even better than we did before. So thank you and have a great conference.